Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're looking at some genuinely chilling archaeological evidence that suggests the world's greatest ancient civilizations didn't just slowly collapse, they actually deliberately walked away. I mean, we always hear the exact same stories about how the ancients fell, right? Massive droughts, bloody civil wars, catastrophic starvation, or complete environmental ruin. But what if the data tells a completely different story? What if, instead, they reached the absolute peak of human achievement, discovered something profound, or maybe even terrifying, and then surgically arranged their own disappearance? Okay, let's dive right into this massive mystery, because it totally challenges everything we think we know about how societies actually end. We're looking at 10 different civilizations here. They span thousands of years, they are completely disconnected from one another, and yet they all bear the exact same impossible fingerprint. They didn't fail. They finished. And then they just chose to close the door behind them. When you actually dig into the archaeological data, those standard textbook stories of drought and war completely fall apart against the evidence of these meticulously planned departures. The conventional model basically relies on chaos. And let's be real, chaos leaves a mess. It leaves mass graves, obvious skeletal trauma, and looted food stores. But the evidence we actually find in the dirt, it shows freshly repaired roofs, ritual deposits carefully sealed away inside temples, and completely unlooted stores. That is the signature of ceremony, not rage or desperation. Section 1. The illusion of collapse. So this phenomenon isn't just some localized fluke. Tracing the dates, it's a recurring human pattern spanning thousands of years across completely disconnected continents. We're talking from the Akkadian Empire in ancient Mesopotamia all the way to Easter Island in the Pacific just a few centuries ago. The timeline proves this isn't just one culture's bizarre reaction to a local crisis. It's a systemic, human response that literally echoes across history. And this brilliantly illustrates that these societies weren't succumbing to some emergency ecocide or starvation. They were executing a scheduled departure. Take the ancestral Puebloans of Mesa Verde. We're told they fled a brutal drought, right? Yet skeletal analysis shows absolutely zero starvation markers. Their springs were still running. In fact, some are still flowing today. And they were freshly repairing their roofs right up to the final season. Or take Easter Island. The famous narrative is that they cut down all their trees to roll those giant moai statues, destroying their ecosystem in the process. But modern experiments show the moai were likely walked upright using ropes, not rolled on logs. The tree canopy fell primarily because introduced Polynesian rats ate the palm seeds. They didn't destroy their world to build statues. The statues were just left behind when whatever they were doing was finished. 400 miles. To put that into perspective, the ancestral Puebloans built 400 miles of perfectly straight, 30-foot-wide roads across Chaco Canyon. And these weren't for trade. They served as a civilizational scale astronomical observatory. These roads led directly to observation points tracking complex celestial cycles over centuries. Modern Pueblo oral traditions don't even use the word flight or escape to describe leaving. They call it completion. And honestly, when a multi-generational 400-mile-wide map of the stars is finished, you don't stick around. The departure is the designed response. Section 2. Erasing the administrative record. Now, what's really fascinating here is how distinctly different cultures use the exact same playbook to erase the evidence of their infrastructure and governance. At Angkor in Cambodia, the massive stone inscriptions just stop, exactly 130 years before the city emptied. It's like the scribes realized the ideological framework of the god king was failing, so they just put down their chisels. Over in Mesopotamia, the Akkadians wrote extensively about what destroyed them, but their actual capital city, which is described in over 100 texts, has never been found. It was dismantled so completely that it is basically archaeologically invisible. In Teotihuacan, Mexico, we see the most surgical example of this. Chemical analysis proves that fires in the elite zones reached over 900 degrees Fahrenheit. That is incredibly hot, hot enough to obliterate administrative records completely. But the residential districts where ordinary people lived, completely untouched. This wasn't some blind peasant revolt. We know that because civil wars leave mass graves and skeletal trauma, which are totally absent here. No, this was a surgical strike on institutional memory. It would be like a modern society permanently wiping all its banking and government cloud servers, but leaving the suburbs perfectly intact. They may have realized that running a 200,000-person metropolis without a god king was the ancient world's most dangerous idea, so they burned the working model. Think about it. In a world where absolute divine rule was literally the only known form of governance, a highly successful egalitarian megacity was a cosmological threat. When they left, they made absolutely sure the blueprints went up in smoke. The city didn't collapse, it closed. Section 3, Vanishing Scripts and Silence. The Indus Valley Civilization sustained up to 5 million people for 700 years without a single weapon or fortification. And then they suddenly dropped their 800-year-old script forever. 5 million people. That was the largest Bronze Age civilization on Earth at the time. No palaces, no throne rooms, no weapons caches. And yet, their highly advanced script vanished completely.
Usually, writing systems survive civilizational stress or they get adopted by conquerors. But in these specific cases, the descendants purposefully refused to carry the knowledge forward. Egyptian hieroglyphics and Mesopotamian cuneiform, they survived empire collapses all the time, but the Indus script? Discarded. The Mycenaean Greeks' Linear B disappeared for 400 years after their palaces burned simultaneously. The Minoans' Linear A script? Targeted in administrative fires and remains completely undeciphered to this very day. They didn't just lose the scripts, they specifically and deliberately stopped using them.
When historians blame outside invaders like the Sea Peoples or Gutians for these collapses, the archaeology actually shows those groups simply moved into a silent vacuum created by the civilizations switching themselves off. The supposed invaders didn't cause the destruction, they were just wandering into the empty rooms left behind. As the saying goes, they surfed the wreckage, they weren't the wave. Section 4, Stopping Work Mid-Stroke. We don't see a slow, agonizing decay of skills. Instead, we see millions of people deciding to simultaneously drop their tools on a single given day. In a true decline, you'd expect to see deteriorating masonry, smaller buildings, scattered debris, a slow fade-out. But instead, we see pristine, hyper-advanced work completely abandoned mid-stroke. Not gradually, not sequentially, but everywhere at once, across entire continents, the workforce simply stopped. At Teotihuacan, obsidian production lines froze mid-manufacture. On Easter Island, hundreds of Moai carving teams working in parallel all stopped synchronously. The largest statue ever, weighing 270 tons, is literally still lying there mid-carving in the rock. And at Tiwanaku in the Bolivian Andes, the incredible interlocking blocks of Pumapunku, cut to sub-millimeter tolerances from incredibly hard andesite, were just left unassembled. It's this unified, frozen gesture. Section 5, The Load-Bearing Silence. 0. That is the exact number of Native American oral traditions among the Cherokee, Choctaw, Osage, or Caddo that claim or even mention Cahokia. Now, Cahokia was the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico. It was larger than London at the time. It was anchored by a 10-story earthwork pyramid and incredibly precise solar calendars. And yet, not one surrounding nation remembers it. 0.
Oral traditions are incredibly durable, meaning Cahokia's complete absence isn't an accident of time, but a deliberate decision by those who held its cosmological knowledge to let the city become a permanent mystery. Cultures forget gradually, right? They keep fragments in myths and place names. For Cahokia to be completely erased from the ancestral memory means the people who held its power purposefully decided that its memory should not survive. The descendants survived, but the knowledge did not. From Cambodia to Colorado, these 10 giants reached the absolute peak of their worlds, uncovered some terrifying truth about their own systemic limits, and surgically arranged their own disappearance. They all followed the exact same sequence. They hit the ceiling of their environment, their engineering, or their governance. They discovered a dangerous idea or an unfixable fragility. And then, rather than dragging their people through a brutal, chaotic collapse, they dismantled the institutional machine. They burned the records, dropped the scripts, set down their tools mid-stroke, and walked away into a carefully curated silence. We are still living inside the silence they chose to leave behind, which forces us to ask what they knew that we haven't realized yet. If the greatest ancient civilizations discovered that their massive infrastructure, their sprawling cities, and their interconnected networks all depended on a single fragile idea, what does that mean for our world today? What happens to us when we finally discover the limits of our own ideas? Thanks for exploring this incredible mystery with me. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the evidence, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.